Hello, everybody, and welcome. We'll let everybody just get settled as you join. We'll give you about a minute to get settled. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, hello, everyone. We have a really great group today, so thank you so much for joining us for our first 12 months of leadership, led by UB's Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. My name is Celine Krzan. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship here at the University at Buffalo, and we're really thrilled to have you as a part of this conversation today with Dr. Dorothy Sia-Asamoah and Dr. Maria Kramer. We're going to have a really fantastic discussion, and before we dive in and I do all of our intros, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping so you know what to expect from today's webinar and the best ways for you to participate. So you'll see this is what your screen should be looking like right now. Along the bottom line in our Zoom screen, we invite you, feel free to jump in the chat. We have our incredible program associate, Maddie, who will be there to help you with any technical issues. She's a superstar, so any questions you have, feel free to drop it in there. But what I want to bring attention to you is this Q&A feature. So you'll see in your Q&A that if you have any questions for our incredible panelists, I'll be monitoring that throughout our conversation today, and I will be asking those questions at the end for our panelists. So any questions that you have that come up through our time together, please feel free to drop it right in that Q&A section. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce our two speakers today and this really fantastic facilitated conversation that we'll be having regarding leading across cultures. And I want to start by introducing Dr. Dorothy Sia-Asamoah. Dr. Dorothy is an accomplished academic and practitioner with extensive experience in global leadership, organizational behavior, and cultural competency. She holds her PhD and MBA from the University at Buffalo, where she is a clinical professor in the School of Management. Additionally, Dr. Sia-Asamoah is the faculty director of global programs and the director of CLOE, our Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. Dr. Sia-Asamoah develops transformational educational experiences that helps really prepare students and professionals for leadership in a really complicated, interconnected world. Dr. Sia-Asamoah is also a certified coach and practitioner in leadership tools such as Gallup Strengths and MBTI. She also facilitates workshops on team dynamics, conflict resolution, and intercultural communication for academic and professional teams. Now, beyond her academic work, she also organizes annual medical and educational mission trips to Ghana, where she actually is right now, and volunteers with a number of different nonprofits. We're so excited to have Dr. Sia-Asamoah here today. She'll be giving us a little background in CLOE in just a moment. And now for the incredible Dr. Maria Kramer. Dr. Maria Kramer is the Donald S. Carmichael Professor and Chair of the Organizational and Human Resources Department in the School of Management at UB. She received her PhD in Human Resources Management and MBA from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and her BS in Business Administration from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Over the course of her academic career, she has worked at 5 different universities, including the University of Melbourne in Australia, and at universities in 3 different and really unique cultural regions: the University of Iowa in the Midwest, the University of Oregon on the West Coast, and Rutgers University, and now the University at Buffalo. She's had various leadership positions at these different universities, including a PhD program director, associate dean of DE&I, and now department chair. She has also served as an officer of the HR division of the Academy of Management, a division with over 3,000 members from around the world, and an editor of 2 journals. So we're so excited to have both of you here today, both you, Dorothy, and Dr. Maria Kramer. Dorothy, I'm going to ask you, do you mind just kicking us off and giving us a little background on CLOE?
Thank you so much, Celine, for having us, and thank you for facilitating all of this. Yes, CLOE in short, but the full name, Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, is internationally recognized for its thought leadership in innovation and organizational leadership. CLOE uses its world-class, globally minded research faculty and practitioners to produce innovative research-based sessions on its academic and organizational partnerships. High impact research is translated into leadership coursework for managers, for executives, and alumni to further their leadership development goals. CLOE also provides a number of custom programs as well as other opportunities, and I'll leave that to the end. Thank you, Celine.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Now, our first question is for the both of you. And Maria, I'm going to ask if you don't mind answering this question first.
Okay.
So what does leading across cultures really mean to you? And why is it critical in today's global environment?
All right. Thank you, Celine and Maddie, for organizing this. I'm happy to be here. So yeah, leading across cultures. To me, it means that a leader has the ability to effectively work with a diverse range of employees. And diverse can be defined in many ways, whether it be a gender, culture, sexuality. There's lots of ways to think about diversity. But being able to effectively work with a diverse range of employees that may have different values, expectations, and or like habits or customs different from your own as a leader. In the academic literature, we refer to this as cultural intelligence. And the reason this ability is important is because in pretty much every country now today, they've been experiencing immigration over the past several decades, such that no matter where you live now, the workforce is composed of people from many different countries. And then there's also, the diversity in the other ways is also just prevalent in pretty much all the countries. And so it is important to be able to motivate employees and encourage collaboration among employees in recognition of different values and customs that they might be bringing to the workplace. And that's my reason of what I think it is, what I believe cross-cultural leadership is.
Okay, so in my opinion, and it's just based on practice and living it, leading across cultures to me refers to the ability to effectively lead, manage, and inspire diverse teams composed of individuals from various backgrounds. So you did mention earlier that I'm joining you now from Ghana, and I happen to have the pleasure, the distinct honor and pleasure of leading a team of about 24 from UB, representing 5 different schools, students, undergrad, grad, faculty, and across the board. In addition, we are working side by side with partners on the ground, making our team about 45. This requires sensitive communication, understanding that there will be storming and norming, and how we navigate all of this, leveraging the diversity that we are blessed to have in all forms, helps us to be part of our global village. So that to me is leading across cultures.
I love those answers. It's specific and it also really frames the conversation we're looking to have today. Now, Maria, this question is for you. How can leaders develop CQ, right? Cultural intelligence. And how can we look at applying it in real world situations?
All right, so yeah, I referred to it earlier about cultural intelligence or CQ, being able to having that ability to relate and work well with people from different cultural backgrounds. And this idea of cultural intelligence, the trait that we call cultural intelligence, has been around now for like probably 3 decades. Originally started by researchers at in Singapore. Her last name is Ang. I forget her first name. And then Lynn Van Dyne and Chris Early. Lynn Van Dyne's in the US and Early's in the UK. But they were some of the early researchers who looked at the different ways that makes a person, especially a leader, be more effective at working with people from diverse backgrounds. And it includes basically 4 components: motivation, knowledge, behaviors, and awareness of being in a cross-cultural situation. So I'll just really briefly go over these 4 different components and how a person can think about building these components, because they definitely are related to each other. And really the first critical step is that you have to be motivated to want to learn about different cultures. And while people do vary on motivation, some people are naturally more interested in learning about other cultures than others, but it also is something that can be developed through cross-cultural encounters. And the research has shown that the 2 most significant ways to develop that CQ motivation is either by visiting a foreign country, which I know costs money and not everyone has the ability to be able to do that financially. But the other is having friends from another culture. And now with so many people immigrating to other countries, there's people all around you from other cultures. And so really building a friendship with somebody from another culture is another way that can get people really interested in just being motivated to learn about another culture besides their own. And so like for me, my first international experience was to London, which made me interested in learning more about the UK and then eventually Australia, where I ended up living for 4 years. So that's the first part, just having that motivation and interest. And then once you have that, you have to develop the knowledge. That's the second component. And that's really just taking the time to learn about a particular country's culture. Not just their language, but like the basic history, the government system, the religion, or whether they're religious at all in that country. And then basic cultural values and business norms if you're in the business setting. Because these basic aspects of a country really impact the way people behave in the country and at work. So you do need to be motivated to take the time to learn about the different countries. And as you learn about more and more different countries, the greater your CQ is over time. And so that's an important guide. And you can just read books, even watching movies. Before I moved to Australia, I watched some recommended Australian movies to learn about their culture that way. So then the third component is the behaviors, or how you act. So once you learn that knowledge, you need to actually then use that to behave in a way that is culturally appropriate when you're interacting with people from that country. I think a very simple example with Australia, they often refer to restrooms as the toilets or the loo. You might have heard that phrase as well. In the United Kingdom, they use the loo. And for I knew that I was supposed to say the loo when I'm like asking when I'm at a restaurant, I ask where is the bathroom. I would still say the bathroom for the longest time. I had a hard time being comfortable saying the loo. So I was not being very high on my cultural intelligence until I learned to feel comfortable saying the loo. But so using the behaviors that are appropriate there. And then the last component is this awareness. Do you recognize when you're in a cross-cultural interaction and then know what to do? And so you need to have the motivation, the knowledge, and know what behaviors are appropriate, but you also have to be aware that this might be a situation where there's a cross-cultural difference. And I actually have a really good example from when I was an officer of the HR division. We had a professor in India that was planning an international conference sponsored by our division, and it was going to be hosted at her university. And she had support from her dean already for this conference. But as it was coming together, I realized as the head of the division that things just were not coming together in many ways, and I was really concerned the conference wasn't going to be successful. So with the other officer team members, we agreed to cancel the conference. And one of the other officers recognized right away that this was a cross-cultural situation where we needed to make sure that we canceled it in a way that allowed the person who was organizing it to save face with her dean. That's a thing in India. You really need to make sure people can have a certain amount of respect with the higher level authority. And so we needed to, because her dean knew this, she was working on this. So what I did is I verbally let her know what our concerns were that led to canceling it in verbal conversation with her. But in my formal email to her explaining that it's canceled, I put all the blame on the HR division. And that's what she could then share with her dean so that it looked like it was our fault and not her fault. And to this day, she still hugs me whenever she sees me at the conference because she was so glad about the way we handled it. And she understood, though, what our concerns were. So that's an example where someone else on the team right away recognized this was a cross-cultural situation we needed to handle carefully. So I know it was a bit of a long answer, but because cultural intelligence is complex, it takes many years to really develop it. But you need to have the motivation, the knowledge, and then know how to act and be aware of a cross-cultural situation.
Marie, I think those are such fantastic, also really tactical ideas that we can employ in our lives right now, right? How we can use it is from watching a movie to connecting to people in that culture to embedding yourself, but also really being mindful of the way communications and expectations are. So useful. So, Dorothy, this next question is for you. We know you're in Ghana right now, which is fantastic. And we know that you grew up in Ghana. You also lived in the UK and now working in the United States. How has that influenced your approach to leadership? And how do you bring up sharing your own cultural identity in your work?
Thank you for that, Celine. Yes. One of the things that I am comfortable in navigating it is adaptability. Oftentimes, I have to remind my team that I'm weird in that way, that I am able to flex and navigate and manage things whilst doing this and that. And it just has become part of the ways that I make do. And adaptability, and I would add flexibility, because the exposures for me in the different cultures that I have lived and worked is giving me some tools. Am I always right? No, but it has helped me to navigate some of these ways and scenarios. The second thing is empathy and understanding. I heard the example that Maria just shared with me, and I'm even right now, just last night, I had to tap into the empathy and understanding in dealing with students from, as I mentioned earlier, 5 schools, faculty, staff, different levels, whilst we work with partners on the ground. Having the ability to be able to put myself in their shoes whilst understanding the intricacy helps me to build strong relationships that are respectful of each other's cultural participation and contribution. The third one I would say is the communication skills. Just this morning, I was teaching one of the students who came from UB about how he welcomes an elderly person to sit down as part of the mission we're doing. And he wanted to speak in our native language. So I had to actually teach him how to say it, but I said, write it down phonetically. And he was so proud of himself when he got it right, to just say, please sit down. Saying that in English could sound weird as often as we say, but in our language, even if you ask somebody, what's your name? They'll say, please, Dorothy, in our native language. But can you imagine me, Celine, saying, please, Dorothy, to you when I'm introducing myself? Yes, so communication skills, depending on the context. Another part of some of the ways that I've been intentional in this space is being intentionally inclusive. Right? As a leader with a multicultural background, I'm likely to prioritize inclusivity. And in doing so, I want to be careful that it's not being conveyed as creating preferences, but it's just my way of making sure that everyone who is in my space, I see you and I hear you. Now, your follow-up question was how I've brought it to my work. All of the above, including celebrating diversity. I enjoy celebrating all the diverse ways that our teams can grow and become globally minded. I tend to lean into being culturally sensitive and have taken on that interest to be able to provide cultural sensitivity sessions in many of the work that I do. I also adore and honor mentorship, both being mentored as well as mentoring others, because for me, particularly, I can't say that I've been able to get to where I am, contributions by so many of mentors in my life. And so these are some of the principles that I have used based on the lives that I have led. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. And Maria, building on this, so we're talking about these different leadership behaviors, right? Curiosity, empathy, communication. What behaviors do you see that seem to be culturally universally effective? And which behaviors are more or less effective depending on the cultural context?
Right, so of the 3 that you mentioned there, and I'm going to answer this though from a research perspective. There's lots of cross-cultural research in the management field that looks at which types of management or leadership practices tend to be well received by employees, or employees find those leaders to be more effective in different countries. So I'm answering it from that perspective. You mentioned empathy as one of the ones that I know Dorothy highlighted how important that is. So that's been shown to be really important in every culture. So far we don't know of any countries or cultures where employees don't appreciate a leader who shows empathy and just is willing to take other people's perspective when you're dealing with conflict, especially. Another one that hasn't been mentioned though, but that we consistently see is appreciated in every culture is what we call procedural justice. Being treated fairly. People want to be treated with a sense of justice. By what that I mean that policies are applied consistently across employees. Decisions are explained to them. Employees have some input into decisions that affect them. Those are kind of the three key parts of a sense of procedural justice. And that has been shown to just be really important to pretty much employees in every culture. One that doesn't always transcend boundaries, or that can vary a little bit. Uh-oh, I don't see you. Are you still there?
Maria, we're good. We can hear
Oh
you.
yeah, all of a sudden my screen went blank. I'm sorry. I see you, found you again. Sorry. One that can vary is how workers respond to what we call being empowered. Whether employees want more responsibility or if they're allowed to give more input into general decisions. That seems to vary by culture, where some cultures empowering a person is seen as like you're showing respect for them, you're showing you trust them, they really value that. But there are some cultures where they have a little bit more of a feeling like they're being taken advantage of when you ask them to take on more responsibilities without extra pay. And so you just kind of need to be aware of how employees might respond to the idea of asking them to do a little extra work. Like I thought I was doing them a favor and showing I trust you, and then I find out they're mad that like I'm just making them do more stuff without more pay. So you do have to be aware of that as a leader when you're working with different people in different cultures.
And Dorothy, adding on to that, what advice would you give emerging leaders when they're looking to prepare themselves to lead in this globally interconnected world?
I am by no means the best or the expert in this, but I would share from just practical experience that having a posture of cultural humility is the first one I would say. Sometimes some people are good at saying, I'm humble, but saying it is not enough. But having that posture and recognizing it as something that is an ongoing growth for all of us. Cultural humility will be one. The next thing that I'll say is that conflict will happen, but navigating how you handle it in the most constructive and productive way makes you even better the next time, right? And so if cultural humility is applied to it with empathy spicing all over it, then we make that conflict resolution even more constructive. Other aspects I would say would be setting clear expectations. When expectations are set right from the beginning, or even if you miss right from the beginning, as soon as you remember, you help to create that atmosphere. And then when things come up, which they will, you address those promptly. And then finally, following up. Following up regularly, checking in to ensure that what we talked about yesterday is what we are still set on doing and what we will do next is helpful. So those are some few advice I would give to leaders as they pursue this space.
Maria, I don't know if you have anything to add there, or
yeah, I would add, just the only thing I would add is that just making sure you're always treating everyone fairly and respectfully. I mean, that's implied in everything Dorothy said, but I think just to be very clear that, it relates back to that procedural justice and feeling like you're being respected. And I just really want to echo the idea that when there is disagreements or you wonder, like, why did that employee do that? Just be willing to take the chance that maybe it was a cross-cultural misunderstanding. I mean, maybe even you didn't even realize the person has certain cultural values. You don't know something about their background, and just assume it was a cross-cultural misunderstanding and take a moment to talk to them and find out what was behind their reason for doing whatever it was that you think was an odd thing to do.
really an important point.
I would just add to that what Maria said, summarized in the cultural humility, the posture of humility is where we become stronger and stronger. And so thank you.
You both are getting some love in the chat, so I think that resonates with all of us, how important that is. And to wrap us up before we open up for questions from our wonderful audience, what's one leadership principle each of you related to cross-cultural management that you live by? And Dorothy, if you want to start.
I'll go back to my first, empathy and understanding. I have been so blessed by people having empathy and understanding for me and of me that I never want to run out of that bucket of empathy and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. Empathy, understanding, and just add and making sure you're treating people fairly, with procedural justice.
Wonderful. And we have time for one or two questions from our chat. So I'll pull up our first one. How do you manage communication across cultures to ensure that everyone feels heard and valued?
That's a difficult one because it's important to do that. But you also, I have learned you need to be careful about whether someone wants to be asked their opinion in a public setting or not. Because some people, if you ask their opinion in a department meeting, they will feel embarrassed and they like, why did you ask me in front of everybody? So it gets back to just kind of you having to know a little bit about the person. And if one time you ask them publicly and they're embarrassed, just explain, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I actually meant to like give you input. I was trying to help you. But just having a good understanding of the different cultures, because I think it is really important to be inclusive, but you have to be inclusive in a way that they feel included. It's hard to do that.
And Marie, one last question for you. Do you have any suggestions on any practical tools or steps that I could take as a leader to navigate cultural differences in my team?
Any practical steps to navigate cultural differences? I mean, one thing is, I think, is actually it takes time, is having some one-on-one meetings with each of your subordinates. I know this is only possible depending on the number of subordinates you have, your team members you have, to have meetings with them to just talk about, hey, could you tell me a little bit that you're willing to share with me about where you're from, what your background is, or talk a little bit about, like, do you like me to be able to talk to you in a department meeting? Can I call on you and ask you questions? Just like, just find out a little bit about their preferences and how they like interacting in a group.
And we have one more question from Donald. So I'm gonna use that as our final wrap-up question. What are some cross-cultural implications of performance measurement? Dorothy, I'm gonna I'll add you back to our spotlight. And I don't know if there's any research, Maria, out there that you reference or recommend for us.
I would go back to, I think that actually, I mean, I could go on for a long time about it. That's why I paused for a minute to try to think what I could say in 30 seconds. Because that really varies by culture. Some cultures are very open to performance, like having goals and objectives and giving feedback constantly to employees. But there's other cultures, and like even Australia was one I thought would be more similar, but you really have to, they handle performance management very differently in Australia than they did in the US. So it really varies by culture. But I do think one thing Dorothy said earlier that's really important is that every employee likes to have clear expectations. So I would at least start with that basic principle of performance management and measurement, is being very clear ahead of time what you expect of them and how their performance is going to be evaluated, what you're hoping for them to accomplish.
Wonderful. So thank you. We are at time. Thank you both for sharing your incredible expertise, your insights, and being so generous with your time today. We're so grateful for this incredible conversation. And before I let you all go and enjoy the rest of your Monday, I just wanted to highlight for everyone that we are doing this every Monday of like the first Monday of every month. So we encourage you, please sign up to hear more from CLOE and our 12 months of leadership program. If you scan this QR code, you will get emailed and you'll get notified of our next and all of our upcoming throughout the rest of this year. And you can get involved with CLOE even more. There's so many remarkable opportunities that will help you level up your leadership and help you really get to that next level. From the Leadership Accelerator program, which is a 6-session professional development program, really increase your performance, your impact, all through coaching and a number of different pieces. There's custom programs that we offer, series of interactive sessions that will give you and your employees the tools you need to level up your leadership practices, and the incredible leadership coaching certification program. If you're interested in any or have questions about what we might offer or other opportunities, you can register for an upcoming open house. You can connect with our incredible team, and we're happy to answer more. Thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Monday.